My name is Lauren, and I really don't get along with my parents. What I hate the most is how much they care about what others think. They act nice to me just to look good in front of people. It seems like their reputation is the most important thing to them. Because of this, they were super strict with me at home, always nagging me about my manners and how I spoke. Of course, I pushed back, but they never listened to what I had to say. In the end, all they cared about was making sure I acted polite so others would think well of them. I kept telling myself this was normal, but I kept wondering how much longer I had to put up with it. Would I feel like this forever? I often thought about running away. When I was a kid, I felt trapped by these thoughts, but things changed a bit when my younger sister, Julie, was born while I was in elementary school. Julie was cuter, and naturally my parents started paying more attention to her. All their love and focus shifted to Julie, and I found it easier to keep my distance from them. I thought this would make things better for me, but their obsession with appearances didn't go away. I realized this fully in my third year of high school when I mentioned wanting to get a job. Ever since I was little, I had dreamed of leaving home, and getting a job felt like the perfect chance. But then my father said something that caught me off guard. "You're going to university." I was shocked by how firm he was. I thought that since they were so focused on Julie now, they wouldn't care much about what I wanted to do. Maybe he was thinking about my future a little, so I asked, why should I go to university? I had a bit of hope, but my dad shut it down quickly. He said, "You need a proper education to marry into a good family." That's when it hit me. Everything they did was for this reason. They were planning to use my marriage to make their own lives easier. But I don't want that. I want to work and be independent. I argued back, "Then will you pay for me to move out?" But I went quiet because I knew I didn't have enough money to leave. My parents gave me a decent allowance because they cared about what others thought, but it wasn't enough to cover moving costs. Plus, my high school didn't allow part-time jobs, so I couldn't save up money on my own. My father knew this, which is why he said that. When I couldn't reply, he laughed and said, "Do you know how much we've spent on you? Can you pay that back?" I was speechless. "If you can't pay it back, you're going to university," he added. I couldn't argue with that. Looking at it differently, though, it meant I could go to college for free. Even if my parents wanted to push me into marriage, they couldn't make me do it without considering my feelings. So, I decided maybe going to university wasn't such a bad idea. I could study, then get a job, and leave home. I agreed to go to college. I enrolled in a local university, but living on my own wasn't allowed. My father didn't care what I studied. He told me, "You don't have to pay tuition, but you have to contribute to household expenses. I'll let you work part-time." He set the amount for living expenses at about $1,200. I wanted to study hard, but my father didn't understand that. I ended up working part-time between classes, trying to make enough to cover the expenses. $1,200 was a lot for me, especially with class reports and exams taking up most of my time. I only had a few hours a day to work, but I somehow managed to earn the money. I told myself I couldn't waste this chance. I worked hard, sacrificing sleep to balance both school and work. In the end, my efforts paid off. I graduated and got a job offer from a real estate company. Finally, I thought I could leave home. But things didn't turn out the way I hoped. When I told my father about the job, he said, "You can take the job, but you're not allowed to live alone." I asked why, and he said, "What if you end up with some strange man? You can't move out until you get married." I tried to argue, saying I'd be fine, but he wouldn't budge. "Unless you can pay back all the money for your tuition, you're staying here," he said. I couldn't believe it. How was I supposed to pay all that back? I had given everything I had. I earned money from my part-time jobs and gave it to my family, so living alone was out of the question. My father laughed loudly when I realized this. It was clear everything was going according to his plan. He had made sure I contributed my earnings to the household from the start, knowing I wouldn't have enough to leave. In the end, my life was unfolding exactly the way he wanted. I wondered if I would ever be able to stand up to him. With these thoughts, I began my first job as an adult, but a new problem quickly came up. Right after I started working, my father suddenly retired, saying it was because of back pain. But I knew that was just an excuse. He didn't want to work anymore and planned to rely on my income. Even though it frustrated me, he was still my family, so I couldn't just abandon him. At one point, I seriously thought about cutting ties with my family and even researched ways to do it. But I realized there's no real way to completely break away from family. No matter what happens, a parent is still a parent, and that's not something you can easily let go of. Still, I didn't give up on my dream of leaving home. I started saving money, hoping I could eventually support myself. But my father didn't miss a thing. One day, a few years after I started working, I came home to find a cake on the table. I asked what was going on, and Julie excitedly told me I got into my dream school. I congratulated her, and she was so happy, clapping her hands in joy. I was happy for her too, but then my father said something that changed everything. "You'll pay for Julie's college, right?" he asked. I was shocked. "Me?" I replied. "Of course," he said. "I can't work because of my back." His words were irresponsible because anyone could see he was fine. But I couldn't afford to make him angry, and I knew he didn't have any money. If I didn't pay for Julie's tuition, she wouldn't be able to go to college. My father knew this, and it gave him control over me. For him, it was the perfect plan. He'd secured Julie's education and stopped me from becoming independent. Julie is a sweet girl, and I'm grateful to her because, when we were younger, she helped me keep a relationship with our parents. She may not realize it, but I appreciated her. So, I agreed to pay for her tuition, even though it meant I wouldn't be able to move out for a while. One night, I was drinking alone, venting my frustrations about my father. Meanwhile, Julie happily started her university journey. To cover her expenses, I worked even harder than before. Day after day, I kept this up until I was completely exhausted. One day, so tired from everything, I accidentally left my wallet at the entrance when I got home. When I went to work, I didn't realize I had forgotten my wallet until I got to the station and tried to go through the ticket gates. Oh no, my wallet! I suddenly remembered pulling it out at the entrance when I left the house. I quickly called home, and my mom told me that Julie had picked it up and was bringing it to the station on her way to university. I started running to meet her. When I got to the station, I saw Julie at a deli nearby, holding something in her hand. "Julie, did you bring my wallet?" I asked. "Yes, here it is," she said, handing it to me. I immediately checked inside and found everything in place: my employee badge, a corporate card, and an IC card. It would have been a huge problem if I had lost any of those. Thankfully, no money had been used, and I was relieved. "Thank you so much," I told Julie before rushing back to the station. Thanks to her, I made it to work on time. I told myself to be more careful from now on. Later, on my way home, I bought a cake to thank Julie. She enjoyed the cake, and I felt good for showing my appreciation. But at that moment, I didn't realize what was coming next. A few days later, Anna from accounting came to talk to me. She's a senior colleague who's been very helpful, giving me clothes and makeup when I was struggling financially. So, I thought she had a personal matter to discuss. But Anna led me to a quiet spot and said, "I wanted to check something. Have you used the company card for anything other than work recently?" The company card is for managing business expenses. Since I'm in sales, I have one, and any personal use would show up right away because it's tied to the corporate account. I was confused and worried because I couldn't think of a time I had used it for anything other than work. As I tried to remember, Anna continued, "There's a record of your card being used at a deli for a bottle of water. Do you remember that?" I thought hard, then it hit me. It was the day I had forgotten my wallet at home. Julie had briefly had my wallet. I always carry my wallet with me at work, so I started thinking the only person who could have used the company card was Julie. I asked Anna, "Do you know the date the card was used?" I didn't want to believe it was Julie, and if the date didn't match, then she wouldn't be involved. Maybe I had accidentally used the card myself without realizing it. I hoped that was the case, but things didn't turn out that way. The date matched the day I left my wallet at home. "Do you remember anything?" Anna asked. I quickly blurted out, "I'm sorry, I think I used it by mistake," thinking it was my IC card. I sometimes buy water at the station deli. Anna accepted my explanation, and I immediately paid back the amount. Despite my awkward excuse, Anna was kind and said, "I've done something similar myself." Even though she was understanding, I still felt anxious about it happening again. To prevent any future issues, I made a request to Anna. It might be a hassle, but can you help me keep an eye on this? Are you sure you're okay with that, Lauren? She asked. Yes, I don't want to make the same mistake again, I replied. Anna agreed to help, and the company avoided making it a big deal. But I knew if something like this happened again, it would be treated as a serious problem. So I decided to take extra precautions. This incident became a turning point for me. I had always believed Julie was a good girl. After all, she was my father's favorite, and she never rebelled against him. But after this, I started to think maybe Julie was just pretending to be good in front of everyone, including me. Her smile suddenly seemed unsettling. I already knew my parents were trying to use me for their own benefit, especially my father, and I had always been cautious around them. But now, I realized I needed to be careful around Julie too. Living with my parents, and Julie started to feel even more uncomfortable. I had always wanted to move out, but now that desire was stronger than ever. I decided to talk to my boyfriend, Walter, about it. Really? Then why don't you marry me and move in with me? Walter said casually. What? I was caught off guard. Why don't we just get married and live together? I'm a civil servant, so your parents would probably approve of me, Walter continued. He had a point. Walter and I were college classmates, and we had been dating for over 6 years. I had thought a little about marriage, but my family situation is far from normal, so it wasn't something I had seriously considered yet. When I was able to casually talk about marriage, Walter already knew my family wasn't normal, and he had always been there to listen to me. Still, he was serious about marrying me. That's when I decided to marry Walter. But there wasn't much time to enjoy the happiness because there were a lot of issues to solve, the biggest one being my father. I had no idea if he would agree to the marriage, and I didn't know how to even bring up the conversation with him. Time passed quickly, and about 5 months went by before I realized I really needed to talk to him. Just when I was thinking about how to approach it, a small argument with my father turned into a bigger fight. Don't make me say it again, he yelled. You need to accept this man I've chosen for you. I don't want to, I replied. I have a boyfriend. A boyfriend? Who is he? My father asked. He's my classmate from college. He's a civil servant now. My father went quiet, thinking for a moment. I took the opportunity to continue. He's willing to offer a decent amount for the engagement gifts, and he comes from a respectable family. My father hesitated. I saw this as my chance and pushed the conversation forward. How much would satisfy you? Maybe $65,000, he said, which shocked me. It was a lot of money. When I talked to Walter about it, he agreed to pay the $65,000. Thanks to that, I was finally able to move out. Once we settled the money, everything else went smoothly. I quickly arranged the move and booked a moving service for Sunday. While packing, Julie came up to me and said, "Make sure you pay for my tuition." I know, I replied, but I added, "There's something I've been wanting to ask you. Did you use my car to shop before?" "Oh, you noticed that?" Julie said without any guilt. I had wanted to ask her about it for a long time, but the right moment never seemed to come. Now that I had the courage to bring it up, her lack of remorse really bothered me. Using someone else's card without permission is a crime, I said, frustrated. We're family, so it's not a big deal, Julie responded, still showing no guilt. I was furious. Make sure to deposit your tuition in the account, I said firmly. But this is the last time. What? Julie exclaimed. Once I leave this house, do whatever you want, I said. Julie just snorted and walked away. By the time the move was done, it was getting late. I went to the living room to say goodbye, and my father was waiting for me. Where's the money? He asked. All you care about is money, I replied, leaving it on the table. My dream was to marry you off to a wealthy family and make a profit. Are you happy now? He said, looking at me. I didn't answer and left. I've already contributed a lot to this household over the years, I said. Yeah, now it's up to Julie's future husband, my father replied, laughing with satisfaction. The thought that he might show up at my new home asking for money one day annoyed me, but I figured I could just turn him away if that happened. Afterward, we had our last meal together as a family, but Julie wasn't there. She had gone out with friends. It was a relief not to see her face. After dinner, I got ready to leave. As I stepped out the front door, I unexpectedly ran into Julie. Still here, big sis? She asked. Oh, right, I need to give this back to you. She pulled out my company card. I quickly checked my wallet. It was too late to panic. I took it when I went into your room, she said casually. I bit my lip in frustration, knowing the card had already been used. Julie continued, I've paid for food and drinks for about 150 people with that card, so take care of the rest. She started rattling off excuses about reunions and going out for all-you-can-drink parties. She even proudly mentioned that she had been mindful of the card's limit and chose a $80 course, as if that made it better. I was furious.
Who are you?
We're strangers once I leave this house for good, I said sharply. Oh, about the tuition, Julie began again. Talk to Dad about the tuition, I said firmly, and then I left. I started a new life with Walter in our new home. Nothing major had changed. I kept my job even after getting married, so the only real differences were my last name and where I lived. But for me, moving out was the biggest change. I finally felt free, a feeling I had never experienced before. I enjoyed my life with Walter and hoped this happiness would last forever. About 5 months later, Julie suddenly showed up at my workplace, causing a scene. I know you're here. Come out already, she yelled at the company reception. I rushed to the front, embarrassed. Julie, what are you doing here? I asked. You tricked me, she yelled, holding up her bank book angrily. They told me the tuition hasn't been paid. Explain yourself. I definitely deposited the money. Did you check properly? I replied, confused. If they say it hasn't been paid, then it's not there. Check your bank book again. Julie, you're not a child anymore. Don't treat me like I'm the one at fault, I added firmly, tired of the drama. I have a job offer. I'm a responsible adult. Julie shouted. I sighed and calmly replied, Look here, there's a deposit of $10,000, right? I made that deposit. But it's been withdrawn since, hasn't it? You're the one who took it, aren't you? Julie looked confused and defensive. Are you sure it wasn't you? She asked. I don't have the card, so I couldn't have done it. Didn't you say before that you paid for 150 people's meals using the card? You mentioned having a reunion. Have you forgotten? I questioned her. Julie's face turned pale as she stammered. That time it should have been paid with a company card, not your card. She still didn't seem to understand, so I explained further. The company card normally takes money from the company's account. That's true. But after you used my company card without my permission, I changed the account it withdraws from, just in case. Julie looked shocked. How could you do that? Yes, you used the company card, but I changed the account to one of my own. This way, if someone else uses it by mistake, it doesn't affect the company. So, when you paid for those meals, the money came from my personal account. Here's proof, $10,000 was taken out because you used it, I explained. But what about the university tuition? Julie demanded. I deposited the money, as I was told to. It's not my responsibility anymore. Figure it out yourself, I said firmly. At this point, Julie started causing a scene again. Before long, the police arrived, and an officer restrained her. It's a mistake. I didn't do anything wrong. Julie screamed. You said yourself that you used my company card. What's mistaken about that? I asked. But it's your fault for not warning me, she protested. I warned you the first time you used it. It's a crime, I reminded her. Eventually, Julie was taken away by the police for questioning. I didn't file a report, because I didn't need to. A video of Julie causing the scene at my workplace had been posted on social media, and it spread quickly. As a result, Julie was disciplined by her university and expelled. Worried about their reputation, my parents took Julie and moved out of state, hoping to escape the scandal by starting over in a new place. My parents moved to a new place where nobody knew about the trouble they had caused. Their plan was to find a husband for Julie and get money from his family. But since both my parents and Julie are difficult people, their plan didn't go smoothly. I soon heard they ran into problems with the other family. Lauren, you're the only one we can rely on. Julie got into trouble with her partner, and they're demanding compensation, my father messaged me. It had only been a month since they moved, and they were already causing issues. I realized that this kind of trouble would probably continue. I replied, I'm sorry, but if you come to my place, I'll have to file a police report about what Julie did. After that, all communication stopped suddenly. Even though they didn't have money or jobs, I didn't hear from them again. I started to feel a little worried, so I hired a detective agency to quietly check on them. It turned out that all four, my parents and Julie, were working at a logistics warehouse. The warehouse was owned by the same company Julie had problems with, so it seemed they were working to pay off their debt. Knowing they were working hard in a dim warehouse gave me some relief. At least they were earning enough to cover their debts and living expenses, so I decided to let them handle their own situation. Meanwhile, I've been enjoying happy, fulfilling days with Walter. My work is going well, and my sales performance is improving. With my family out of the picture, my savings are growing, and everything in my life feels stable. Things are going so well that I sometimes feel a bit anxious about the future, but for now, I just want to enjoy the happiness I've worked hard to achieve with Walter.